What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our Big 12 football channel.
The last couple of years for Oklahoma State have really been up and down. They've had some big wins. They've had some tough losses. They did not play a very tough non-conference schedule last year, playing Oregon State. I mean, that was their big Power 5 game, so you got to criticize them just a little bit for their, you say, we're scheduling a Power 5 team, and then you go out and schedule Oregon State. Now, Oregon State was actually not horrible last year, and they'll play them again this year, but I'd like to see Oklahoma State play in a bigger game, maybe against an SEC school or one of the top-tier Pac-12 teams, something like that. This team has a lot coming back in 2020, and with a schedule that sets up that's not too tough, this could be a sneaky, maybe even dark horse playoff contender, in my opinion, because like I said, they've got a lot coming back. They open up on a Thursday night with Oregon State, so they play Oregon State again this year, this time at home. They did go on the road to play Oregon State last year. Get them at home this year. You would expect Oklahoma State to be a clear favorite in that matchup. They play Tulsa the next week on September the 12th, and then Western Illinois on September 19th. So again, this is just not a very difficult non-conference schedule. And when you have a weak non-conference schedule, it can be good, and at the same time, it can be bad. It can be good because if you go undefeated, you're probably going to make the college football playoff. Maybe even with one loss, if they win the Big 12, they're going to get in. I don't think that's a guarantee. But at the same time, if you have a tough non-conference schedule and you do have a loss, then you're pretty much guaranteed to get in. So it's kind of good and bad. But they play 3 non-conference games to start off the season, and then they get a bye week before playing TCU, before they start their Big 12 conference slate, which will be 9 straight weeks, 9 straight games. Texas had this as well. Texas has their bye week before going into conference play. So it's going to be a tough conference schedule, I think, with no break in there. And you look at a road game against Oklahoma, of course, that's going to be tough. They'll play TCU on the road on September. That's actually supposed to be October the 3rd. I had a typo there. October the 3rd is when they will play TCU. That'll be a Saturday game. And then they play Iowa State on October the 10th. Kansas on October 17th. So that's where they will start in their Big 12 conference schedule. Iowa State, I think, is going to be pretty good. I think TCU is going to be improved. And then they get Kansas before playing Oklahoma on October 24th on the road. They don't play Bedlam at the end of the year this year. Instead, it's really right smack in the middle of the season. That's going to be a big game. Potential for a rematch between these two teams in the Big 12 championship, in my opinion. I think Oklahoma is one of the top contenders. Oklahoma State is one of the top contenders in the Big 12. I think it's a wide open conference. There are a lot of teams that might have a shot to get to that Big 12 championship, but I think Oklahoma State is one of the top contenders when you look at those teams. That, again, huge game on October 24th. They'll play Texas Tech on October 31st. And then Baylor on the road on November 7th. Baylor, of course, made it to the Big 12 championship game last year. And if they're really good again, I think it's going to be tough for Oklahoma State having to play at Oklahoma and at Baylor right there in late October and then early November. So that is a pretty tough stretch there, potentially. Again, I don't know for sure how good Baylor is going to be. West Virginia on November 14th. Kansas State on the road on November 21st. And then they'll play Texas on the Friday after Thanksgiving at home in a game that could determine who goes to that Big 12 championship game. If Oklahoma's there, if they're doing what they always do, and then Texas and Oklahoma State are battling for second, they do play in that final week of the season. So that could be a huge monster game right there. But all in all, the schedule not too bad. Yeah, Baylor and Oklahoma on the road makes for a couple of difficult matchups. But other than that, I think Oklahoma State has a really good shot to win the rest of their games. I'm not saying they can't win those games, but I think they're going to be favored in the rest of their games, probably even against Texas because it's at home. So if they can get by either Oklahoma or Baylor and then get a big win at home against Texas, this team could definitely, I think, make a run at that Big 12 championship. But again, it's going to be tough to run the gauntlet in the Big 12. I think you might see a team in the Big 12 championship game this year with 2 or 3 losses. That's how wide open I think it is. And Oklahoma State, I think, has a schedule that could potentially get them there. And if they do really well in the Big 12, like I said, the non-conference schedule is really weak. That's why Oklahoma State is an interesting team to watch as a dark horse, maybe even playoff contender, because they could be sitting there at the end of the year with maybe just one loss or maybe even undefeated. Who knows? And they could be a Big 12 championship game win away from maybe crashing the playoff party. I don't think people are really talking about them as a playoff contender. And I don't think they're one of the top contenders, but I do think you have to put them in that dark horse conversation because of this schedule and the way it sets up. And again, it's really just not a very difficult schedule in 2020 for the Oklahoma State Cowboys.